Welcome, everyone. Today, we are diving into an explainer that decodes an ancient psychological formula, one that actually claims to be the ultimate blueprint for a life with zero conflict. We're looking really closely at a fascinating text called the Madhupiṇḍika Sutta, which is also known as the Honeyball Discourse. Now, what's so incredible about this ancient framework is that it doesn't just offer you vague, feel-good philosophical advice. No, it breaks down the exact cognitive mechanics of why we argue, why societies go to war, and how we can stop that downward spiral before it even begins. It's essentially a cognitive behavioral masterclass straight from antiquity. Okay, let's take a quick look at the logical roadmap we'll be using to systematically unpack the human mind today. We're going to hit a world without conflict, the anatomy of an argument, the chain of perception, reversing the cycle, and finally, the Honeyball Discourse. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. A world without conflict.
So, our explainer begins in a forest with a seemingly simple encounter. The text sets this incredibly vivid scene where the Buddha is resting during the day under a young tree. Along comes a wandering man named Dandapani who is out for a walk. He approaches, leans on his walking stick, and essentially demands to know, "What exactly is it that you teach?" And the Buddha hits him with this incredibly bold, almost unbelievable claim. He says he teaches a doctrine where a person simply does not quarrel with anyone in the world. Not with humans, not with celestial beings, absolutely no one. Plus, he adds that by following this teaching, a person is no longer dominated by perceptions, is free from doubt, and is completely detached from craving. Well, Dandapani's reaction to this was to just shake his head, stick out his tongue, wrinkle his forehead into 3 deep folds, and literally walk away completely baffled. And frankly, who could blame him? It sounds impossible, right?
But to understand why this matters, we really have to look at the massive stakes of human conflict, which the text explicitly links to violence, war, and deception. You see, the text doesn't just treat arguing as some minor social annoyance. It traces a direct, undeniable line from our internal mental arguments to taking up sticks and swords, engaging in bitter quarrels, slandering others, and speaking lies. The source makes it crystal clear that global physical violence is really just the outward manifestation of an internal psychological disease.
Section 2. The anatomy of an argument.
So after Dandapani walks away totally confused, the Buddha retreats to his monks and introduces the actual root cause of all those dark outcomes we just talked about. He tells them that if a person can just stop obsessively latching on to the things that trigger our complex perceptions, then all those evil states, the swords, the lies, the hatred, they simply cease to exist. But then, he gives this incredibly dense, super brief summary, gets up and just leaves the monks scratching their heads. So the absolute crucial point here is this ancient concept of mental proliferation. This is the true villain that hijacks our minds. The original term is papancha. Think of it as cognitive spiraling or overthinking in absolute overdrive. It's the mechanism where a simple thought uncontrollably expands into a massive web of concepts, judgments, and obsessive narratives. This is that exact micro-moment a totally neutral observation mutates into a deeply personal grievance. It is literally the engine of every argument you've ever had.
Now, because the Buddhist summary was so brief, the monks seek out Mahakaccana. He's a brilliant thinker, highly praised by the Buddha, and they need him to deconstruct this idea. The monks realize they need an expert to decode this highly compressed teaching. They know Mahakaccana is the guy for taking brief, complex statements and expanding them into detailed, logical, and highly practical frameworks. So they approach him and say, "Hey, can you explain the anatomy of an argument to us, step by step?"
Section 3. The chain of perception.
To understand this, Mahakaccana visualizes the exact micro-moments that lead to macro conflicts. He doesn't look at the external world, he looks entirely at the internal mechanics of human cognition. He breaks down the literal fraction of a second where peace turns into a full-blown quarrel. He explains that every single conflict begins with a simple neutral input from one of these 6 senses. Now, we usually think of 5, but in this ancient framework, the mind itself is the 6th sense organ. It perceives thoughts the exact same way an eye perceives light. According to Mahakaccana, whether it's a sight, a sound, or just a memory randomly popping into your head, these 6 gateways are exactly where the trouble starts.
And here is how the trap snaps shut. Mahakaccana maps it out meticulously for us. Step 1 and 2. The eye sees a form and visual consciousness arises. The meeting of these 3 things, the eye, the object, and consciousness, is what he calls contact. Step 3. From that contact, a feeling arises. Step 4. What you feel you perceive and you start to think about it. And finally, step 5. What you think about, you mentally proliferate. You obsess over it. You spin a whole story. Boom. That is the exact moment mental proliferation takes over, and we start to spiral.
And here's the wild part. This obsession isn't contained to the present moment. Oh no, it aggressively drags our minds through the past, the present, and the future, just fueling the fire of an argument. As the source text explains, once mental proliferation takes hold, it bombards you with perceptions. You start obsessing over things you saw or heard years ago, you fixate on things happening right in front of you, and you anxiously project arguments into the future. Your mind literally becomes a time-traveling conflict machine.
Section 4. Reversing the cycle.
But the good news is, Mahākāccana doesn't just diagnose the disease, he provides the logical cure to stop the spiraling in its tracks. Having shown us exactly how the machine of conflict is built, he then shows us how to dismantle the whole shebang. If you cut the chain reaction right at the root, removing that initial obsessive contact, the conflict simply cannot exist. It's cause and effect. On one side, sense meets object, which creates contact, leading to spiraling. On the other side, Mahākāccana says if the I is not there, or the form is not there, or consciousness is not there, you cannot even point to something called contact. If there is no contact, there is no feeling. Without feeling, there's no perception. Without perception, there's no overthinking. You just short-circuit the entire process.
When that cognitive chain is broken, all these destructive latent tendencies and physical acts of violence fade away completely, leaving zero residue. The text is very specific about what we are actually extinguishing here. It lists the underlying tendencies, the pull of lust, the push of aversion, the stubbornness of rigid views, the hesitation of doubt, the ego of conceit, and the darkness of ignorance. When you stop that cognitive spiral, the source basically guarantees that the urge to grab a weapon, to hurl an insult, or to spread a lie vanishes without a single trace.
Section 5. The Honeyball Discourse. So the monks are absolutely thrilled by this clear breakdown. They take it straight back to the Buddha, essentially bringing Mahākāccana's thesis back for peer review. And the Buddha confirms that Mahākāccana's logic is absolutely flawless, noting that he would have explained it the exact same way himself. This profound realization prompts another monk, Ananda, to step up with this really beautiful analogy. He says, imagine a man who is utterly exhausted, starving, and weak. Suddenly, he is given a rich, sweet honey ball. With every single bite, he experiences an incredibly rich, sweet flavor that completely revives him. Ananda says that any wise person who examines the logic of this teaching will experience that exact same deep, satisfying joy right in their own mind.
And honestly, that's how this text earned its name. A perfectly structured reminder that stopping global conflict actually begins by catching our own internal mental spirals. Madhupiṇḍika literally translates to the honey ball. It's a reminder that delving deep into the mechanics of our own minds isn't meant to be some dry, boring academic exercise. It is meant to be intensely liberating and deeply satisfying. It teaches us that peace isn't just something diplomats do at a fancy round table. It is an active, moment-to-moment cognitive practice for all of us.
So I'm going to leave you with this thought to carry into your day. Can you spot the chain reaction in your own mind before the honeyball turns bitter? The very next time you feel that surge of frustration, or you are just about to draft that angry response, remember Mahākāccana's steps. Notice the sense contact, acknowledge the feeling, but try to cut the circuit before the mental proliferation takes over. Thank you so much for exploring this ancient wisdom with me today. Keep your minds clear, and I'll catch you in our next explainer.